Hello, good morning. Today's topic is relative autonomy of professional communities or professional spheres. So, what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to discuss a little bit of philosophy, a social philosophy of different professional spheres. The professional spheres are something which we have to understand, but before we start, we have to understand the concept of professional sphere. Say, in our society, for example, we have different professions. We have different professional communities. We have doctors, we have engineers, we have lawyers, and we have professors and different people. And each of this profession or professional community, I mean, we can try to understand each of them as part of a professional community. The community of doctors, the community of engineers, the community of professors, the community of technocrats, and so on and so forth. So they each of this professional community has certain concerns, certain problems which are very unique to that particular profession. For example, engineers, as we have already discussed in some of our previous meetings, engineers are concerned with certain issues. See, when they construct a bridge, for example, let's take a very common example. They have to come up with a plan and they have to organize certain things. Okay. And there are certain concerns that they should not be influenced by others. They should be given a kind of an autonomy. What is more important for many of the professions is that they demand a certain amount of autonomy, a certain amount of independence and freedom. Or rather, there should not be any interference from outside so that they can carry out their concerned services, their relative services, without any interference so that they can deliver the best of the services. So this is the idea. So when professionals deliver their services, if the society or someone else interfere very frequently, that will be a disturbance. That will be a nuisance. So that should not happen. But at the same time, it's also important that professionals and their services are regulated by the society. Some moral demands which the society, overall society has, should be communicated to the professional communities and they take it into account, take it seriously and respond to that with responsibility. That's very important. So there should be something like the society overseeing the activities of professional communities. But at the same time, it should not be unnecessary interference into their activities. So there should be a balance. Okay, so we are trying to understand this in the context of three models. So this is actually a lecture which is prepared on the basis of the ideas presented in this book by Peter Bradley, The Essence of Business Ethics. Of course, in this book, the author explains these issues in the light of business ethics. I'm just trying to present the same insights which he discusses for us to understand the nature of professional communities or professional spheres. So let's start. Okay, let's talk about modern society because we are living in a modern society today. And we all know that modern societies heavily relies on various professional communities and their services. We cannot imagine living in the society without their services, without doctors and engineers and professors and lawyers. It's very difficult for us to carry out our normal functions in the society. And these communities, as I already mentioned, demand certain autonomy or autonomous status. Okay, they enjoy certain autonomous status in the society. So we respect their autonomy, we respect their decisions, and we will not be going to them always and asking them why so. Okay, so at the same time, we should know we have the rights. See, for example, in the context of medical profession, healthcare, when a patient goes to the hospital or to a doctor, the professional decisions which the doctors and the hospitals arrive at should be communicated properly to the patients. Patients have the right to know why this particular decision is being taken instead of something else. Okay, And there are certain, of course, certain rights which members in the society have when it comes to their relationship with the professional communities. But at the same time, we should also recognize that different professional communities have their relative autonomy. And this kind of an autonomy is necessary for each professions to grow and deliver their services without any external interference and hindrances, so that they can deliver the best of services, which I've already mentioned in the introduction. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind that autonomy does not mean total independence. There is no concept of total independence or total freedom. The moment you come to the society and wish to live as a member of any society, you have to actually keep away this idea of total freedom or total independence. You have to learn how to be part of a group. You have to actually reformulate your values. Your values should not be too individualistic. So how do we place the different professional communities in a society is our question, particularly in a modern society. And we can also ask certain other questions like, in what way are they related, or each professional community is related to each other, and at the same time they are related to the society as a whole. So what is the nature of that relationship? Then we need to evolve a social philosophy. So it is in this context we are going to talk about a social philosophy of professional communities. Okay, so we need to evolve this social philosophy of professional communities. Now let's see, there are three different social philosophies of profession I am going to discuss here, following the insights presented in Bradley's book. The three different philosophical positions are Unitarian, second one is Separatist, the third one is called Integrationist, or Integral View, Separation View, and Unitarian View. So before we get into the details of these three social philosophies, let's try to understand some of the important characteristic feature of any modern society. Okay, whether it is Western or Eastern, whatever it is, any modern society. Of course, in a typical Western democracy, liberal democracy, developed countries like countries in Europe and the United States, this concept is more manifested. Okay, you can see that the kind of autonomy which professional communities enjoy are almost complete. But when you come to other societies, say for example in India, the relative autonomy, the level of autonomy is a little less. Of course, there are cultural, social, and political reasons for that. I'm not getting into that details here. So whether it is more or less, the professional communities, wherever they are in a modern society, have to enjoy certain level of autonomy. So we are talking about that. So for that, we have to understand what is a modern society. And we all know that modern societies are organized in a very different manner than early days, vis-a-vis the pre-modern societies or ancient societies. Because there is something called a cultural, social, philosophical phenomenon called modernity. I'm not going to the details of modernity. That's another philosophical topic. So let's assume that all of us know what modernity stands for, at least vaguely. Modernity stands for a process of differentiation in society, resulting in several relatively autonomous spheres, each with its own logic, procedures, and rules. So this is what I was talking about. So you have the education system, you have the business system, business sphere. So let's take the example of the business sphere. So there are institutions within that sphere, organizations and various other institutions within that sphere. So they have their own internal logic. One of the prime concerns of a business organization is to maximize profit. Without that, they cannot survive. So that's a very important purpose of business organizations to exist. But when we come to another sphere, say for example, administration, bureaucracy, which is another sphere, profit maximization is not a major concern there. Their concerns are very different. But at the same time, those concerns are relatively autonomous. I mean, they don't share the same concerns There are overlaps, of course, but they don't share exactly the same concerns. There are different concerns, different problems, different issues, different demands. All these are differences among that exist among these different functional spheres, but at the same time, for them to function effectively and fruitfully, they need some sort of autonomy. There is no doubt about it. And there are different social spheres in a modern society, each being relatively independent of the other. So there are business, administration, bureaucracy, legislature, then you have the judiciary is another institution or another social sphere. Education is another one, and religion, for example, is another one. There are several of them. You can actually see the difference from each other. That was not the case in the pre-modern world. In pre-modern societies, they were all mixed up. It was very difficult to make distinctions between, okay, education has one concern, business has another concern, religion has another concern. The value system that see over the activities in each of these functional spheres is different now in a modern society, but was not there earlier. In a pre-modern world, it was not so. So our private lives, for example, which is actually a sphere of family and friendship, which is actually an independent domain today. I mean, we all carry out our private lives in our family surroundings, along with our friends, and we do so many things there. We communicate with each other in a fashion that it's a sort of a free communication. We can share anything with our family members and friends. But that's not the case when you go to the public sphere. If you're a politician addressing a gathering of, say, 10,000 people, you won't say the same things that you shared with your family members, say, half an hour back. There the concerns are different, the demands are different. So again, our economic life, for example, is a sphere of the market. The market as such in most of the modern societies, many of them are capitalist societies. In most of these modern societies, the market as such is an independent domain. Okay, so it has got its own concerns. Products are introduced to the market, expecting that people would buy them. So there is a consumer, producer relationship that exists. Profit maximization is a concern. Quality improvement is another concern. Then responding to the needs and requirements of people are other concerns. So there are many other concerns which are so unique to that particular profession. Then political life is another sphere, the sphere of the state. So we can find that in a modern society, it is a fragmented kind of a phenomenon. There is no fundamental unity that essentially unites all aspects of the society, or internally unites all the different spheres of the society. Of course, there are overlaps and there are, of course, some relationship between them. But at the same time, we cannot say that the value system, which is valid in one particular sphere, should be universally valid in all other spheres. But that was not the case in the pre-modern societies. In the pre-modern society, there existed only one value sphere. And that was common for all. You can actually understand this if you really examine the economic system of pre-modern societies. Okay, I'm not going to the details now because that's not our major concern here. Society is fragmented into different functional spheres in a modern society, and we can see that it has lost its sense of unity. And here it characteristically differs from the pre-modern societies where society exhibited a unity of spheres. So, see, for example, if you examine the structure of the medieval society in Europe, let's try to understand this. There are three social groups of people, like the knights, where they were engaged in fighting, and fortitude is a virtue we associate with them. Then comes the clergy class, where they are expected to pray, and they were expected to satisfy certain other kinds of needs of people, and prudence was considered as a virtue for these people. And then there were the peasants who work, and temperance is considered as virtue for them. So you have a social and economic hierarchy that existed in ancient Europe. So you have the nobles constituted the aristocrats and the clergy. Then the knights, merchants, other managers and government servants come next. The peasants last. So there is no social mobility possible. I mean, it was not very easy. The social from one class to the next was not very easy. And to some extent, it was determined by birth, as we have in our society in India, the caste system. So it was a communal society, we can see. Even the medieval and ancient European society was also a kind of a communal society where kinship-oriented extended family existed. And of course, it is very interesting to compare the Indian society with this, the ancient Indian society, and to some extent the contemporary society also, because even in the contemporary times, we have some residue of the ancient pre-modern society or social politics and social morality that exist in our country due to the deep penetration of caste system into our society. So caste plays a very important role in the Indian society. So there are, as all of you know, that 4 important castes, the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra existed. Forget about the philosophy behind it. I'm not getting into those philosophical and spiritual meaning of these terms. Of course, you can also provide such an explanation for them. But I'm here focusing on the social philosophy. In practice, at least during the contemporary times, at least during the pre-independent days, immediately before the pre-independent days, what existed was a caste society in India where all kinds of social mobility was prevented. And it was a hierarchical structure. And yet, at the same time, these 4 communities that existed in India were interconnected, were interrelated. They were not autonomous. They had their own duties, responsibilities, but at the same time, they were not autonomous communities. The society was considered as a homogeneous unit, but at the same time, a set of responsibilities united them. So the identity of each caste was a relative identity. It could be understood only in the light of its responsibilities or its obligation towards other communities. So when we try to understand modern societies or modern civilization, we can see that there are 2 large distinct realms in modern civilization as well. Though on the one hand, we have already explained that it was constituted of different functional spheres, but at the same time, broadly, we can see that there are 2 large distinct realms. One is called the life world. The other one is called the specialized functional spheres. So what is a life world? What is meant by life world? So what is meant by life world? Life world is the overall sphere of cultural tradition with its basic outlooks and values forming the common cultural world people live in. So it's a bedrock of all your life. I would rather say that the concept of life world can be understood as the most fundamental sphere of life, no doubt about it. It constitutes the values of the society, the overall values of the society, and it provides people with strong bonds of solidarity. It is the life world that instills the sense of unity among people, different groups of people, different communities of people. So despite the fact that people are doctors and engineers and other kinds of workers, they are all human beings. They are all citizens of a particular community, of a particular society. This sense of unity is this sense of unity is actually built upon the idea of life world. And its basic values are warmth, recognition, and support. So without that, this unity cannot function. And without this unity, no society can function. No functional spheres can exist. Society, no doubt, is a foundational bedrock of everything. Even for the functional spheres to exist, you need the society for that. which is a very abstract concept, no doubt. And the norms of each body community originate from pre-modern local traditions. We can see that, in a sense, the pre-modern value system to some extent linger in these different, norms of each community. So, there are when you come to the other broad sphere or large sphere of modern civilization, the specialized functional spheres, there are a large number of such professional functional spheres in any modern society. I've just cited some examples which are quite obvious and all of us understand. But there are many others. Okay, there are many others in our society, each performing one task within the society, without which, the society would be lacking something. So we need car mechanics, we need scooter mechanics, we need many other things. Even what will happen if a shopkeeper is not there? If a shop is closed on a particular day, what will happen to us? We find it very difficult. Okay, so all these indicate the importance of different roles people play in a society. We are not trying to understand these roles in terms of individuals or people. We are trying to understand these roles in terms of communities of people, groups of people. Okay. So there is technological technocrats, technicians, technological research people, medical science and care people who provide these services, people who provide the medical care and services, economic market system and organization of bureaucratic sphere, all kinds of spheres. So they all seek to perform their specific tasks by applying strictly formal procedures and rules, and expressing target-oriented values such as efficiency, procedural rationality, emotional neutrality, and task differentiation. So each of these professional communities will have many of these values. Okay, and we can see that in a sense, to understand the real role they play in a modern society, we have to understand the concept of instrumental rationality. They all operate rationally, and that rationality which on the basis of which they operate is called instrumental rationality. What is that concept? In instrumental rationality, what happens, which we draw on when we calculate the most economical application of means to be a given end. Okay, so maximum efficiency, the best cost output ratio, is its measure for success. So there is some concept of efficiency which we'll be discussing in another lecture later. The concept of efficiency. Of course, we need this for any profit. We expect efficient services from any professional community or a professional for that matter. And what is a Unitarian view? So now let's come to the Unitarian view. So assume that the society as a whole exists, and it contains everything within it, the different functional spheres within it. You have the business, you have education, you have bureaucracy, you have entertainment, you have all these functional spheres within that. So there is an overall, what you call, shell of society, like an egg. It contains everything within it, nourishes everything within it. So in this view, which is obviously a pre-modern view, the Unitarian view, which conceives that society as a whole constitute a homogeneous unit, and society as a whole advocates a set of values which are universal and common, or all values are universal and common to all functional spheres. So whatever functional spheres that exist within the society will have to adhere to these value systems, which is advocated by the society. So it actually ignores the functional separation of different spheres in society. To some extent, it denies the idea of functional independence or value independence. It says that ultimately all functional spheres have to comply with the value system of the society as a whole. So as I mentioned, it's obviously a pre-modern view. and it does not recognize the distinct character of functional spheres in modern society. It applies the general values and standards of the overall culture to evaluate activities in all functional spheres. See, so you would be wondering that some of the activities carried out by a business professional would be evaluated in the light of a religious value system. And that's quite possible because the religious value systems are quite often the bedrock of all value systems in pre-modern societies. There are also other frameworks like Marxism, for example. Marxism propagates a kind of Unitarian view because they have certain set of values which are universally applicable to all activities which humans perform, whether it is family or entertainment or business or education. The value system for the Marxists are same. So in that sense, Marxists propagate a Unitarian view, which is very difficult to function in a modern society, in a capitalist society. Catholicism is another example. So you'd be wondering why Marxism and Catholicism, what is common with them? So you can understand what is common with them is that both propagate a universal value system. Gandhian ethics is another one, which from our culture in the recent past, because Gandhi was proposing a kind of ethical perspective, which is a value perspective, which is quite pre-modern, we can put it in that way. Unitarian perspective can be picturized in this manner. So you can see here the overall society. M here stands for the common moral community, the universal moral community, the moral anxieties and expectations of that community. And all the F's here stand for different functional spheres. So you have F1, F2, F3, Fn. Okay, there are many number, n number in a sense. Multiple functional spheres exist in a modern society. So they are all within that and they all comply to the universal moral system propagated by the society as a whole. And here the society is obviously conceived as an organic whole, and it assumes that the professional spheres operate in an unbroken unity within the moral community. So it assumes that the different professional spheres operate in an unbroken unity within the moral community. So the moral community is an overarching shell, as I mentioned earlier. So the identity between the morality of the life world and the morality of the professional spheres is underlined as far as this model is concerned. They are not very different from each other. Now when we come to the problems, the limitations of the Unitarian view. Unitarian view, of course, existed in human history in the past, no doubt. But it's actually impractical or inappropriate in the modern context, because it fails to address the complex issues and ethical dilemmas we encounter in the modern social context today. Because our society is highly complex in today's world. Okay, ours is a very highly technologically oriented society, and we are related to different organizations, different countries, and different interests we have to negotiate with on a daily basis. And it's very difficult to function with such a simplistic moral perspective in such a context. Now we come to the second view, the separation view. What is so special here in the separation view is that, as the name indicates, the separation, the differentiation is recognized. The differentiation between the functional spheres and also the functional spheres and the society. So naturally their autonomy is underlined here. So people like Adam Smith, who can be even considered as one of the towering figures of capitalist mode of economic philosophy, he seems to have promoted this idea of separation view. And this view obviously opposes the idea of an undifferentiated unity. So the functional spheres in modern society are radically independent and disconnected islands. They have to be understood as independent. Each has got its own logic, its own functional concerns. its own anxieties, its own problems, its own internal logic, and it functions, operates with that logic. So the overall value system and its universal applicability is radically rejected here. In no way these concepts are valid as far as a modern society is concerned. That is what the propagators of separation view would argue for. And the concept of invisible hand of the market, which is advocated by people like Adam Smith, would explain the situation here in a better way. It explains how the open market system may lead to socially beneficial communication between the egoistic private pursuit. See, now, in order to make this idea clear, let's try to understand one of the functional spheres in a modern society here, the business sphere. Of course, the business sphere has got its own internal logic and its own problems and concerns. So, as I mentioned some time back, one of the fundamental concerns of the business sphere is to make profit. So, naturally, profit maximization becomes a major value concern as far as the business sphere is concerned, but that's not the case with the society as a whole. But as far as the separation view is concerned, the society is helpless. It cannot directly control the business sphere because the business sphere constitutes an independent, autonomous sphere. So what will it do? I mean, what can we do here? So people like Adam Smith believe that the market has an invisible hand. It will take care of the genuine requirements of people. So the invisible hands will explain how market system will organize itself. And it ultimately would benefit the people and control, some sort of a control, a limit to the egoistic private pursuits of people who participate within the business sphere. So there is no doubt the separation view emphasizes the autonomy of professional spheres. Once you advocate autonomy, then the major concern is, does it mean that the society has no control over what is happening within the sphere? Or allow these people who participate in the business sphere or any other spheres to do anything they want? No, that's not the case. There is a way in which the society can interfere, but that's the non-moral way. The moral anxieties can never be directly communicated to the functional spheres because that won't make it legitimate. So there are certain non-moral means by which you can communicate, the society can communicate its moral anxieties to the different functional spheres. So it recognizes, the separation view recognizes that there are non-moral means that explains how professional communities pursuing their own isolated interests may contribute to human welfare. So there are certain non-moral means that would explain, or that would rather ensure, that the professional communities, their activities, or their pursuing their isolated interest may ultimately contribute to human welfare. And each profession is a part of the completely autonomous sphere in the society. Each of them exists separated from the cultural, ethical sphere of the life world. Society cannot make any direct moral appeal. So it denies the very possibility of any direct moral appeal. Each professional community has a normative principle of its own. So there is something which functions within each of them. And in the case of business, for example, the normative principle is maximize profit, private profit, and reduce cost. Which obviously sometimes, which is, see, if you understand that the normative principle that operates within a business community is maximization of private profit and reduce cost, then we can see that it actually is in conflict with some of the interest of the society. So this needs to be regulated. There should be a proper negotiation of interest here. There should be some sort of a control. So society should impose some controls, because controls should not be based on direct moral appeal. That's the only demand these people have. It's important that society should ensure professional activities are not harmful or destructive, because society is the ultimate bedrock. The larger community has non-moral ways, non-moral means to influence professional communities, and such a non-moral mean is the law. So we can see that the separation view, the advocates of the separation view argue that the larger community has a very powerful non-moral means by which it can control, by which it can communicate, by which it can influence professional activities. And what is it? It's law, the legal system. Law is the transformer, according to them, between moral community of the society and the professional communities. And laws will transform moral inputs from the life world into outputs that the non-moral system of traditional world can understand and deal with. So you need to basically transform the moral anxieties to the professional communities in a non-moral language. And law is that language. Now organizations can understand if they have to function, if they want to function in the society, they have to follow certain laws and regulations. Say, for example, an organization cannot pollute the environment beyond a point. There are some limits to that. And once you cross the limit, society will come forward and say, no, if you are doing this, get out. You cannot function here. So that is effectively done not through morality, not through ethics, but through laws. So the laws are the non-moral means by which these moral anxieties can be communicated to the professional communities. So this will represent the separation view here. As we can see, the functional spheres and the moral community are different. In the integration view, we have seen that the functional spheres are within, but here they are not within, they are outside. They constitute an independent domain. But at the same time, law here functions as a transformer of the moral anxieties to the functional sphere from the moral community. Now we come to the third view, which is called the integration view, which is probably a balancing view between the two extremes of Unitarian view and separation view, which will probably explain the functioning of professional institutions or professional communities within a modern society in a more balanced and appropriate manner. It is neither over-optimistic nor over-skeptical. And it acknowledges that we cannot directly apply demands from the moral community to the functional spheres of modern society. And this is here it agrees with the separation view. Here you need to transform this by using different means. Of course, law, the importance of law is recognized here. But at the same time, it does not exaggerate the distinctions of the functional spheres. The functional spheres are not completely independent. No overimportance is given to instrumental reason. There should be some control over instrumental reason. And it recognizes the relative autonomy of professional communities. They have their own professional concerns and values, but at the same time, they are also part of the society and are regulated by the moral concerns, directly or indirectly by the society. So here you have the integration view. Everything is like what you have seen in the separation view, but here there are certain zones of integration. They are not only related indirectly through law, but there are certain zones of integration. And the integration view argues that there is a close connection between professional spheres and the cultural ethical tradition. So there is some sort of a unity in difference between the moral community and the functional spheres. There are differences, but at the same time, there are important spheres or there are important domains, important zones of interpenetration or integration. And the functional spheres are to be understood not as totally independent or free domains, but as subsystems that have relative independence and internal logic of their own, but at the same time, they derive their legitimacy only by virtue of being a part of the society, only in terms of being a subsystem of the society. Society is essentially understood as an overall system that consists of a number of subsystems which are characterized by a specific social role. So each subsystem has to play a role, a social role in the society. And they communicate with each other through zones of integration. So these zones of integrations are underlined. With each exchange, the integrity of the universe of subsystem with is the society is maintained. So the society's integrity, the society's unity, in some sense is recognized in this view. So what we need to understand is that probably the integration view is a more balanced view, which would explain the importance of different functional spheres responding to the moral anxieties of the general society, of the life world, of the cultural and ethical tradition that constitutes the bedrock of any society. Law and the legal system, of course, is one of the strongest and powerful ways by means of which society can directly influence or control the different functional spheres. But that is not the only system. There are some zones of integration and where we need to understand the society as a whole, the overall system, and each functional sphere as a subsystem. There is a kind of mutual relationship between them. The society is constituted of these subsystems, but at the same time, each subsystem owes its existence to the overall society. So this probably would explain the legitimacy of having a discussion on professional ethics in today's world. So I'll wind up this lecture here. Thank you.